Well, greetings once again, fiction lovers. Time for us to have a brief chat about our second installment in Mrs Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. I'm going to emphasize in this conversation, I'm not going to probably get through the entire reading. I think you've all seen enough. But I'm going to focus on a few things, not the least of which is going to be the appearance of Peter Walsh in the narrative. He is an important character for a lot of reasons and that I'll cover in a minute. So the Faber-Castell, again, keeping with modernism, using a mechanical pencil. So this is the Faber-Castell TK Fine Vario with the 0.5 millimeter lead. It's quite delightful. Okay, this first sentence here, or paragraph rather, on page 29, is a nice physical description of the servants in the household at the Dalloways. So not just Lucy, but also then you have the cook, the Irish cook, who is in there whistling in the kitchen. So Clarissa's come home, and there's a message for her, and then Lucy tells her that her husband Richard has invited to lunch at Lady Bruton, Millicent Bruton, and Clarissa has a sort of momentary disappointment, and she's really irked by the fact that Lady Bruton, who gives these marvelous luncheons, has invited her husband, has not invited her. Just if you're going to take a quick look at the way that Lucy feels about her mistress, that is Mrs. Dalloway, where she says that taking Mrs. Dalloway's parasol, handle it like a sacred weapon which a goddess, having acquitted herself honorably in the field of battle, sheds, and placed it in the umbrella stand. So it's a little bit humorous to think that she's looking at an umbrella in this kind of way. But if you want to think about what this implies, at least in the mind of Virginia Woolf, is that it goes back to, on one hand, Clarissa's idea about life being a dangerous thing, but also that how perilous perhaps the London streets are with the crowds and the motor cars and all these sorts of things that represent something like a danger to those who venture out. Let's see. So this long sentence that begins here at the bottom of page 30. I'd like you to take a look at it. Because it is it's again emblematic of the way that Virginia Woolf writes and what all she's able to reveal. And so you're talking about a sentence that's probably 100 words long, and begins, "She began to go slowly downstairs with her hand on the banisters as if she had left a party, where now this friend, now that, had flashed back her face, her voice, had shut the door and gone out and stood alone, a single figure against the appalling night, or rather, to be accurate, against the stare of this matter-of-fact June morning." Nice personification there. "Soft with the glow of rose petals for some she knew, and felt it as she paused by the open staircase window, which let in blinds flapping, dogs barking. Let in, she thought, feeling herself suddenly shriveled, aged, breastless, the grinding, blowing, flowering of the day out of doors, out of the window, out of her body and brain, which now failed, since Lady Bruton, whose lunch parties were said to be extraordinarily amusing, had not asked her." So it's this the choice of a phrase in the anaphora heightens Clarissa's feeling of exclusion, of isolation, out of doors, out of the window, out of her body, and that somehow the way that she sees herself, that having not been invited to a party like this, a luncheon like this, means that she is somehow less woman than she would be otherwise. As it turns out, Millicent Bruton just likes to surround herself with men and doesn't like the competition of other women. She's particularly mannish and doesn't really like the contrast. So remember we talked about the about houses being physical symbols of women, the attic being the psyche, the basement being the sexuality of the woman, and then the various rooms that would represent parts of a woman's personality, perhaps that of mother, and these sorts of things. Okay, so as you gloss, you'll see things like the narrow and narrow, which is just simple diacoby. Here at the bottom, and then at Constantinople, and again, and she's talking about reading these memoirs, and this just happens to be a memoir of someone associated with I guess probably the War of 1812, not the War of 1812, the war between France and Russia. Sorry, I'm brain cramping here. But so this is the kind of thing she reads is just memoir, nothing that's really going to provide any sort of real education. And so here it was something central which permeated, something warm which broke up surfaces and rippled the cold contact of man and woman, or of women together. So you've got that polyptoton there. For that she could dimly perceive, she resented it, had a scruple picked up heaven knows where, or as she felt, sent by nature, who is invariably wise. So the anaphora here, the initial, it was something, it was not beauty, it was not mind, it was something central. So the initial I was not constructions create this sense of suspense for the reader who waits to see what it is. Okay. So here is, Sally Seton. Okay, so you got something that should have arrested your attention as she is in flashback with her, the first time that she meets Sally Seton there over the course of a summer, and they have what can only be described as this is sort of the homoerotic charge of young woman with young woman as Sally comes in, and so this is something that Woolf explores in other works about the nature of love, and does it matter what the relative gender is between those who are in love with each other. Let's see. So all this, you should pay attention to the Sally Seton part. She's going to make an appearance later, so I'm not really going to touch on her, no pun intended, at this stage. But as you're walking through the text, one of the things that you're going to see here is that when a good deal of emotion is involved, you're going to have, especially when Clarissa is in flashback, a number of figures of repetition. So here is the epiphany when she's recalling the fact that Sally is in the house with her. She is beneath this roof. She's beneath this roof. So the effect is to express the wonder and the deep feeling of her observation, her realization that this woman that she is attracted to in ways that she can't really understand is there in the house. So if you take a look at all this flashback thing, so it's the idea of repetition of things that have happened, except now you're playing it out in your mind, and there's just going to be a load of these figures. What you'll notice especially is when Peter Walsh makes an appearance, just how often Woolf employs these various figures in an effort to characterize him. He is a guy who is constantly looking back into the past, wondering what if this happened, what if that happened. Also is fantasizing about things, and you'll see that he's fantasizing about this girl that walks down the street when he's near Trafalgar Square. This is a nice example of personifying death, where there's Clarissa up there considering taking a nap until Peter Walsh interrupts her. Laying her brooch on the table, she had a sudden spasm, as if while she mused the icy claws had the chance to fix in her. So, of course, this is the sense of death. And we also now know how old she is. She had just broken into her 52nd year. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm going to flip over to where Peter shows up. Okay, let's see. Oh, this is kind of a nice piece here with the exchange between Clarissa and Lucy. Take it away. Give it to Mrs. Walker with my compliments. Take it away, she cried. So you've got that diacope. Then here's the vocative diacope, which is the where the words are split by the naming of something. But thank you, Lucy. Oh, thank you. Okay, and again, this is to express. It's a sense of vehemence to express the high degree of emotion, and then it becomes epimony down here. Thank you, thank you. Okay. Let's see. All right, here we go. Peter Walsh. So there's Clarissa upstairs. She hears some rustling down or some commotion downstairs. Here's the front doorbell, and here is Mrs. Dalloway will see me, said the elderly man in the hall. And you're going to come to find out, of course, that he and Clarissa Dalloway are roughly the same age. So Woolf does this intentionally to show you how the world views Peter. Okay, although he sees himself very differently. So here's a nice example of epergesis. Yes, 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 he muttered as he ran upstairs. She will see me. After 5 years in India, Clarissa will see me. So the will see me and will see me is an example of epistrophe, repetition of elements at the end of successive phrases, clauses, or sentences. And so here's our introduction to Peter Walsh. Perfectly characteristic of him. He just comes barging in. He doesn't, doesn't ask to be announced or anything like that. He just runs straight up the stairs. And here we go with the thing that you need to be paying attention to as you read through the narrative. "And how are you?" said Peter Walsh, positively trembling, taking both her hands, kissing both her hands. Epistrophe again. She's grown older, he thought, sitting down. I shan't tell her anything about it, he thought, for she's grown older. She's looking at me, he thought, a sudden embarrassment coming over him, though he had kissed her hands. And here it is. Putting his hand into his pocket, he took out a large pocket knife and half opened the blade. All right, so even though Woolf is not a fan of or an exact subscriber to the elements of Freud, there is just no question that all this business with the knife is, this is just phallic symbology. It's symbology. It's just penis references all over the place. And every time Peter feels threatened by his masculinity is under attack, out comes the knife. Okay, so this odd behavior, as I say here in my note, is emblematic of Peter Walsh. There's this phallic symbology of it, and it's exemplary of his masculine insecurity. Okay, so if you just take a look, I'm not going to walk through all these notes, but just look at all my notes as to how often these figures of repetition show up now that Peter is there. Okay, and this is a really interesting bit. So it is, he thought, shutting his knife with a snap. And then what is Clarissa's response? Richard's very well. Richard's at a committee, said Clarissa, and she opened her scissors. So you've got these two, I guess what we'll call weapons of war in a society sense. Okay, so the woman has she has the scissors, and then she's going to bust out the needle later as she's sewing to try to repair this dress. So that also speaks to Clarissa as well, that she's not necessarily going to send it out to have it repaired, that she's going to do the repair herself. So perhaps that makes her feel more feminine and more like a housewife, even though she has a house full of servants. Okay, so let's see. You've got this back and forth inside their two minds as they are encountering each other for the first time in a really long time. You get the her thoughts about Peter. And here he is again. Yes, said Peter. Yes, 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 he said, as if she drew up to the surface something which positively hurt him as it rose. Stop, stop, he wanted to cry, for he was not old. His life was not over, not by any means. He was only just past 50. Let's see. I'm going to kind of gloss through here. You'll see this narrative technique that Woolf uses. The business in parenthetical, in parenthesis, where there was a time when earlier Clarissa is thinking, and then in parenthesis we would have the tracking of her movements across the room, and then she picks this up, and then she goes to the window and she does all these sorts of things. It's just to create a sense of immediacy there in this portion of the narrative. Let's see. Hyperbole is a device that's associated with Peter, and the things that he says, the things that he thinks, and so forth. This is a really cool long passage when he just sort of blurts out, "I'm in love," he said, "not to her, however, but to someone raised up in the dark, so that you could not touch her, but must lay your garland down on the grass in the dark." This is Woolf telling you that Peter, that the way he thinks about Clarissa is the way you would think about a goddess, an idealized form of woman, which is why he was so deeply wounded, heartbroken when she refused to marry him, because he held her up to a standard of perfection that's just not possible. And so to be thrown over by one's view of perfection is perhaps the worst thing that can happen to one. So notice how as we roll down the page, the way I marked it, I am in love, in love, in love. He is in love. He has that. She felt he is in love. And of course she's jealous of that, because you get the sense that she doesn't have that sort of feeling for her husband. And the passing emotion that she has, the recollection of feelings that she might have had like that for Peter, are almost immediately offset by her realization that he would just be impossible to live with on a day-to-day basis. Okay, maybe the kind of person that you have an affair with, but this is nothing that she would ever do. Okay, so as you push down the page, right, here we go. He was in love. He is in love. Okay, and let's see. So this is a nice interior monologue for Clarissa as she thinks about the. So who is it that Peter has fallen in love with? Of course, he's fallen in love with a married woman. Okay, a married woman with 2 kids. And what's he doing in London? He is trying to look into a divorce for this woman. Okay. So this is Clarissa thinking. She flattered him. She fooled him, thought Clarissa, shaping the woman, the wife of the major in the Indian Army, with 3 strokes of a knife. What a waste, what a folly. All his life long, Peter had been fooled like that, first getting sent down from Oxford, next marrying the girl in the boat going out to India, now the wife of a major in the Indian Army. Thank heaven she had refused to marry him. Still, he was in love. Her old friend, her dear Peter, he was in love. All kinds of devices going on here. You've got the isocolon of she flattered him, she fooled him. And then you've got a... I'm not going to mention that. Yeah, I am. Okay. Symploche is the combination of anaphora and epistrophe. So remember, anaphora is the elements at the beginning of phrases, clauses, sentences. Epistrophe, elements at the ends. So she flattered him, she fooled him. This is symploche. Okay, so it's the combination of anaphora and epistrophe. Okay, sorry, I couldn't help myself. Let's see. Another marvelous scene here is as Peter is overcome in his excitement to tell what's happening, and what happens. society that he wishes desperately to be part of, and he's overcome by this sense of failure. And then to his utter surprise, suddenly thrown by those uncontrollable forces, thrown through the air, he burst into tears, wept without the least shame, sitting on the sofa, the tears running down his cheeks. Marvelous point there, wept without the least shame. So how comfortable he feels with this old friend of his. And are we to take that this is an indication of his lack of masculinity? Well, certainly in that culture, this is just not something you do. And yet, Clarissa does not censure him for it. Okay, let's see here. Now, push on over to page 48 here, and Elizabeth makes an appearance. "Here's my Elizabeth," said Clarissa, emotionally, histrionically perhaps, because she's just been over at the window trying to comfort him, right? And it had to have looked weird when her daughter comes in and sees her in close proximity to this man that she doesn't know. Okay? "How do you do?" said Elizabeth, coming forward. And this is a great personification, a marvelous image echo. The sound of Big Ben striking the half hour struck out between them with extraordinary vigor. Okay? Striking and struck. What is that? Polyptoton. As if a young man, strong, indifferent, inconsiderate, were swinging dumbbells this way and that. Isn't that a great image? Just like the clapper is going back and forth inside the dome of the bell, then think about a young man swinging dumbbells. So the clapper then looks like the dumbbell. Okay. So as I said before, you've got all these figures of repetition. Peter. There's your epergesis. My party tonight. Remember my party tonight. So that's simple diacope. And then it repeats again. Remember my party tonight sounded frail and thin and very far away. And so here's Peter. Remember my party. Remember my party. So that's epimony. And so this parties then are the only vehicle whereby Clarissa, feels in control, worthy, and good enough. And yet it's this same thing that Peter just simply doesn't understand, even though he's the one that told her when she was younger that she'd be the perfect hostess. Let's see, just love the repetition of this image. The leaden circle is dissolved in the air. Okay, and as we push on here yet again, as I said, and I'm just gonna let you take a look at this. If you want to stop and mark this stuff down, it's fine. But here's the emotional Peter thinking about Clarissa. Where there is nothing, Peter Walsh said to himself, feeling hollowed out, utterly empty within. Clarissa refused me, he thought. He stood there thinking, Clarissa refused me. So you've got this sort of elaborative diacope. You've got the polyptoton of thought and thinking, and then this is great also. Sorry, I get excited about this. "Ah," said St. Margaret's, and this is the clock at St. Margaret's Church, and it's much smaller. The bell's going to be smaller. "Ah," said St. Margaret's, like a hostess who comes into her drawing room on the very stroke of the hour and finds her guests already there, because Big Ben has already chimed. Yes, "I am not late. No, it is precisely 11:30, she says. Yet, though she is perfectly right, her voice, being the voice of the hostess, is reluctant to inflict its individuality. Some grief for the past holds it back, some concern for the present. It is 11:30, she says, and the sound of St. Margaret's glides into the recesses of the heart and buries itself in ring after ring of sound, like something alive which wants to confide itself, to disperse itself, to be with a tremor of delight at rest, like Clarissa herself, thought Peter Walsh, coming down the stairs on the stroke of the hour in white. You may not be in love with Woolf's prose, but brilliant writer. I mean, just to see how seamlessly she pushes from this metaphoric comparison between the St. Margaret's bell and a hostess, and then seamlessly into the hostess of the novel, Clarissa Dalloway. It's just so great. Okay, let's see. So here we've got more Peter Walsh. There he is walking down the street. And here come the boys, 16-year-old boys, who are marching. And so again, the war keeps inserting itself into the narrative in all kinds of ways. And so as he hears them behind him, then and as they march, it is, thought Peter Walsh, beginning to keep step with them, a very fine training, but they did not look robust. They were weedy for the most part, boys of 16, who might tomorrow stand behind bowls of rice, cakes of soap on counters. And so as he's disparaging them in his mind for being weedy little boys, they just pull away from him. I can't keep up with them, Peter Walsh thought, as they marched up Whitehall, and sure enough, on they marched, past him, past everyone, in their steady way. So again, a look at the disparity in age, at the way that Peter feels about himself, and the way that he probably actually is. And this is going to be, I myself feel this at times. I look in the mirror and I'm like, who the heck is that old guy looking back? Because I don't feel old. And so again, this is part of what Woolf is exploring. How does one look? How does one feel? And what are the realities associated with aging? Let's see. I wanted to introduce one new concept to you here, another figure of repetition. It's called epergesis. And so when he says, one had to, let's see, okay. I can't keep up with them, Peter Walsh thought, as they marched up Whitehall, and sure enough, on they marched, past him, past everyone in their steady way, as if one will worked legs and arms uniformly, and life with its varieties, its iridescences, had been laid under a pavement of monuments and wreaths and drug into, and that's nice polysyndeton, and drugged into a stiff yet staring corpse by discipline. Again, death's not far away. One had to respect it. One might laugh, but one had to respect it, he thought. So epergesis then is the repetition of a phrase, and generally it is there's an interposing a positive phrase or apposition that's often to clarify what had just been stated. And so the clarification then here is, one had to respect it. One might laugh, but one had to respect it. Okay, so epergesis. Let's see. All right, so here's the woman. Here's the woman who just showed up, right? She's extraordinarily attractive, he thought. So here he is again, and he's just seen his old lover, and he's having questions about himself. And he's in London to deal with trying to get a divorce for a woman that he wants to marry. And here comes this woman down the street. Let's see. But she's extraordinarily attractive, he thought, as walking across Trafalgar Square. And he's just like jarred out of his thoughts. In the direction of the Haymarket came a young woman who, as she passed Gordon's statue, seemed, Peter Walsh thought, susceptible as he was, to shed veil after veil. So a veiled woman, the sense of mystery, of course, and veil after veil is nice, simple diacoby, until she became the very woman he had always had in mind, his dream girl. Young but stately, merry but discreet, black but enchanting. Straightening himself and stealthily fingering his pocket knife. Of course he is. Again, so susceptible to fantasy, as all men are, might I add. And again, his lack of confidence in his masculinity results in him busting out the phallic symbol so that he can deal with it. I'm not going to say anything more about that. Okay, He started after her to follow this woman, this excitement, which seemed, even with its back turned, to shed on him a light which connected them, which singled him out, as if the random uproar of the traffic had whispered through hollowed hands his name, not Peter, but his private name, which he called himself in his own thoughts. You, she said, only you, saying it with her white gloves and her shoulders. Okay? And then, let's see. This is the perfect fantasy representation. I'm going to stop the recording, the little lesson with this one. Okay, so he's following her with his eyes and has started to physically follow her. And, okay, she moved, she crossed. He followed her, and this is going across the road. To embarrass her was the last thing he wished. Still, if she stopped, he would say, "Come and have an ice," he would say, and she would answer perfectly simply, "Oh, yes." I mean, right? It's just, like I said, it's the perfect fantasy representation there. So just continue in your reading, and mark down those marvelous passages and the devices that Woolf uses. And I'll see you next time.